Hello everyone, my name is Michael and this is Brilliant Blunders, a channel that's all about me, playing chess. In this video I will be covering game 5 from the Pakleza Cup. I have the black pieces. The previous games you can find on my channel and the tournament games playlist. Let's see what happened in this one. My opponent started with d4, I go knight f6, he goes c4, and I play c5. So I'm inviting him to go to the Benoni defense, and my intention was actually to play the Benko gambit. But my opponent was not in the mood for a kind of imbalanced aggressive game, and he played a very calm e3. And this this took me out of my preparation, because this is not a normal move that you usually see. But here comes an important skill that I do not have, meaning, and I mean that it's recognizing when you can transpose to a different opening. So in this position, what I can do is take, play d5, and this is a Caro-Kann. We're now in the Panov attack variation of the Caro-Kann through an unusual move order. But yeah, remember this position, and how it normally appears on the board is e4, c6, d4, d5, takes, c4, knight f6. This is exactly the same thing as we would have here, right? This is back to the game. So yeah, so this is something that I could have done, and this would have got me back into a territory that I know. I do not have that much experience in the Panov, because it's almost never played at my level, but at least I know some theory, right? After what I played, which was e6, I'm like making stuff up as I go. So yeah, so that's something that's important to learn as you progress in chess. So yeah, so I played e6. My intention is now to somehow play a different setup that I play with black, which is the Queen's Indian, with this pawn here, this bishop here, this bishop here. Although I already have played c5, so it's slightly suboptimal at this stage. But you know, I was just making things up. He played knight c3, I now go for b6, so yeah, I was intending to play with this Queen's Indian style, but now my opponent surprised me with the move queen f3, and I'm okay, did I mess something up, right? So I opened up my rook, and I totally did not see this queen coming. Fortunately, I have knight c6, and this is all this all holds. Although it's slightly uncomfortable, because my opponent plays d5, chasing my knight. I move my knight to b4. I could have taken and played like this. So this is probably an alternative, or play knight e5 right away, chasing the queen, and do something like this maybe. But I decided to go for knight b4 right away, with a threat of going to c2. My opponent moved the queen back. Now I took the pawn. He chases my knight with a3. I move back. a6. a6 is an okay square. I can later move to here. I could have played my knight over here, but I did not like getting hit with this and having to move my knight once more. Now goes cd5, and I have a number of decent moves here. I can reroute my knight to c7, which is a normal square for this knight to develop. I could move my bishop, I could move my queen. And I was really concerned about this pawn moving forward, right, and kind of blocking my whole position, which it would be pretty difficult for me to develop. I would have to spend a lot of time just trying to win this pawn, because it would have stopped me from developing my knight to c7. That wouldn't have been possible. My bishop would have no squares, and if I can't move my bishop, I can't castle. So, all sorts of trouble, which is why I played the absolutely horrible move d6, which, as you can see, it just opens me for a very, very simple tactic. I'm exposing this diagonal to my king, and my opponent has two pieces that can exploit this, and this simply blunders this knight, because my opponent just takes the knight, I take back, he moves the queen here, and I lose the bishop. Yeah, so that's an extremely bad opening from my side. Up to d6, my moves weren't great, but were kind of workable. This one, I'm now down a piece with absolutely no compensation, unlike this game 3, where I blundered an exchange, but I had some nice attacking position. So this, I'm simply down a piece. The position is bad. It should be losing, and it is losing, of course, if white plays correctly. But obviously I did not give up here. I wanted to try and see if my opponent makes a mistake and make him work for that win. So obviously I have to play aggressively to try to induce any mistakes on his part. I need to develop my pieces, so I play g6, obvious intention, play bishop here, he brings back the queen, I play bishop g7, he plays bishop d2, so we're both developing. I'm now attacking his king side, which really does not, it's not like hard to defend against this, but I'm hoping to kind of force him to make some weaknesses on the king side. He could have played f4, which is a nice move because it simultaneously defends the pawn and attacks the queen, although it does weaken the king slightly, but he's up a piece, so he shouldn't be that concerned about king safety. But he plays like the calm g3, castle, h4, chasing my queen away, queen moves back to e7, knight develops, I move my rook to the semi-open file, he castles, and at this stage there is really nothing for me to gain on the king side. I do not really have any opportunities to attack here. So I decided that now I'm switching my plans, and I want to push this pawn majority, because this is potentially for me a source of counterplay, right? So I have this 3-on-2 pawn majority, so if we exchange all the pawns, I have a passed pawn, and I can try pushing it, and I don't know, maybe make him sacrifice one of his pieces for my passed pawn, or do some other stuff. So I start with a6, preparing the b5 move. He goes rook f to e1. I go b5. This has an additional benefit of making room for my knight, which can now develop to a more active square. Here I did not want to move because he could just exchange, and exchanging pieces is not really in my favor. He goes b4, so he's just stopping me right away from advancing any further. I go here, and he plays rook a2. So, he's not doing anything about this pawn tension. He's keeping it for now, so am I. I'm trying to prepare a better situation for me to take, right? So I play rook a c8. So obviously I'm now looking at the knight, and if I take, his knight will be hanging, right? Because it would have been attacked by the bishop and the rook. So that's kind of my threat. So he protects the knight by moving rook to c2. I go queen to b7. Now I'm attacking his pawn on d5, which is only defended by this knight. He goes e4. This kind of protects the pawn, but you need to notice that there is a rook x-raying the queen. So it protects the pawn because one of my attackers is a queen, right? So if I were to take, he has to take with the knight. And if I take now, he can safely expose his queen. This x-ray is not dangerous because he's winning the queen, right? And in this situation, he's up a rook on top of everything else. So that doesn't work. But it's something to keep in mind. So now I took a pretty risky decision because I can win this pawn if I get rid of this knight first. And it's a risky decision because I give up my strong bishop, which is controlling this long diagonal, and I allow his bishop to step there. And with open black squares around my king, this is kind of asking for trouble. But I figured, I need to take risks in this game. I'm already losing, and yeah, I'm winning a pawn, and I'll just try to make something of that pawn majority. So he took with the bishop, of course. Now I take the pawn, and my knight cannot be captured because now the queen is pinned. So he takes here. I take back immediately, and actually it was better to first get rid of that bishop, attacking the queen, so he has to take back, and now I take, and now he does not have this strong dark squared bishop looking at my king. He's still up a knight, but I have this 3-on-1 majority here. It's already supported by my rook and queen, so maybe there's something there. With correct play from white, of course there isn't, but these are my chances in this position. But instead of that, I took with the pawn first. Now he moves the bishop back correctly, preserving the bishop. I move my knight back to b6, so my intention is to reroute it to c4, to more active square, also getting out from this, because any move from the queen, I would have to move my knight. He goes queen e3, attacking my pawn. I go knight c4, so this protects the pawn because it blocks the rook from seeing it. And he goes queen h6, which I have to admit I missed during the game, that he's preparing this pretty simple but pretty effective tactic, right? So he's now threatening to checkmate my king on g7. But fortunately I have the move f5, just moving my f-pawn, so my queen defends the g7 square. And now I think my opponent kinda panicked, because he played bishop to b2, and I think he was concerned about this pawn getting taken by the knight, which which I saw, but I thought it was just way too greedy with my king being so exposed to just go pawn hunting on the other side of the board. So if he didn't move this bishop, I probably wouldn't have taken this pawn. But clearly he was concerned about that. So what he could have done instead, for example, is e takes f5. So just pressing on, attacking on the king side. And let's say if I take back, he can check me. I play king f8, queen f6, king g8. And now there is a funny move, knight g5. So the idea is you're threatening checkmate in one, right? Because knight covers this square and the queen just goes over here. But actually this blunders checkmate on the other side of the board. So this was a way that white could have gone like overexcited, trying to checkmate my king. Instead of knight g5, he could have done this, like take my rook first, rook takes back. I now protect my back rank, intending to go here next. And if I take the pawn now this tactic with knight g5 works. Another move that could have been played in this position is h5, right? So also attacking the king side, but from the other side of the board, and go for something like this, just doubling the rooks and pressing on my exposed king. So that was how white could have played this in a more aggressive manner. But instead he played bishop b2. And obviously I'm super happy to take this bishop, because now there are no more threats on this diagonal. I no longer have to worry about getting checkmated on g7, so perfect for me. He took with the rook, and now I actually get to win another pawn, right? So I take rook on e4, and now this position does not look so horrible anymore, because yeah, I'm still down a piece, but I have this majority, pawn majority over here. And yeah, if we exchange a couple of pieces, which is going to happen very shortly, then it's a very interesting endgame. So my opponent takes with the rook. I think he was now, just from what I remember about seeing, you know, his his facial expression and judging his attitude. At this point, he was actually concerned that he's somehow letting the game slip from his grasp, and he was also starting to running low on time. And I took back with a queen. He offers a queen trade, and I accept it, but on my terms. So I don't take. I just move my rook first. So when I take back, my rook would be active in the center of the board. He proceeds with the queen trade, and now we have this absolutely incredible endgame, which is really hard to navigate, and it's really hard also to say who's better here and why. I'll share a story about this, because the tournament was played as part of like a weekly course. So in the morning we play a tournament game. In the afternoon we have a lecture with one of the chess instructors who were running the course, grandmasters from Poland. And after one of the lecturers asked us if we have any interesting positions from the games we played that we could discuss. He was specifically asking about endgames, because we were studying endgames. And I showed him this position, and I asked if he thought it was interesting. And he looked at it and he said, "It is interesting, but you won't learn anything." And when I heard that, I was a little bit surprised. But when I actually analyzed this endgame, I see now what he meant. Because there are some endgames where you need to recognize certain patterns. There are certain, I think like pattern is the best word. Certain like standard setups, or like piece arrangements that you need to see and move towards, and that's how you play certain endgames. And this endgames is not like that at all. This endgame is all about calculating at every move, because there's a lot of possibilities for both sides, and situation can change with every move, and there is no like clear-cut way how either side should play optimally for the best result. And it's not even clear who's better here, because it's depending on how the game progresses. It can be win for white, can be win for black, can be a draw. So and as I mentioned, we were already starting to run pretty low on time, so we did not really have time to properly calculate all the moves. And even if we did, I very seriously doubt that either of us could have calculated all the intricacies of the position. So let's just move. I will stop at certain points, but this endgame is so complex that you could analyze it for hours. So I won't go too deep into this. Just a couple of focal points. So here goes king f1, I go king f8. Important detail, I can't go here because this, so I have to go through f8. He goes rook a2, so just keeping the rook passive with the protecting the pawn. King e7, and now he has the option of forcing a rook trade, although it is not certain who benefits from it. Because, for example, I can go king d6, and if he takes, knight g5, I can even go king d5. If he takes, I go b4, ab, cb, knight f6, king d4, and again, he now can push his pawns, I can push my pawns. Who's faster, who will manage, hard to say. I have to constantly be on the lookout for any checks from the knight, so it's really hard to say who's better in this endgame. But instead of that, in this position, he played knight to g5, just attacking my rook and my pawn, so very obvious move. I go rook to g4, he does not take the pawn, he plays king to g2. Now I play h6, protecting my pawn, attacking the knight, knight h3, rook a4. And here I was actually thinking about an interesting idea, that after this move, what he could have played was the move f4, sacrificing the knight, but completely trapping my rook. So the rook has nowhere to go, right? All of the squares are covered, but it's still not clear if white is better here, because even though this rook is trapped, the king has to stay here to protect this pawn, which is kind of like the key to the cell that the rook is locked in. But now I have a king and 3 pawns against a rook and a pawn on the other side of the board. And this is actually might be enough for black to get an advantage. So an example line that I looked at goes something like this. So now white has moved the rook to the third rank to protect this pawn instead. But I'm just using my king to push the pawns. Yeah, and he has to stay guarding this. So that's why he does not have any mobility. And in this situation, if I just go for b3 right away, this is losing, because after he takes, I move the king to move the pawn further, but now he can't play rook e2 with check. I cover, he takes the pawn, now he's winning. But if in this position I play, instead of b3, king a2 first, and he does nothing, now b3 is winning, because after king takes, I move b3, and he does not have this check, because now my pawn is already covering the escape square, so he can, pin the pawn, but now my rook moves out of its jail with check, king goes back, rook goes here, and yeah, this is winning for black. So, very, very interesting stuff. But that did not happen. None of that happened. He moved the knight back. Now I move my rook out of its potential jail, attacking his pawn. He activates his rook, and I start pushing my pawns. Here I played this move a5, which is pretty bad because I give up my pawn over here. Should have played something like this. But yeah, as I mentioned, we were both running pretty low on time. And I was also focused on just pushing my pawns. b3, knight e7, so he's now attacking another pawn, which I cannot protect. So I just push forward, moves the knight here, h5, protecting this pawn. And now he's had enough of my pawn grabbing. He decides the knight needs to go over here to defend against these passed pawns. And here I played the move rook a2, which I think this was a point where I still could have made a big change. So my intention is obviously to help the pawns promote, but it's not a good way, because the rook is still in the way of this pawn. What I should have played was something like rook e4 or rook d4. And this means that my rook is now free to just go over here, protect all this area, and importantly, it plays against white's plans of pushing his pawns. And for example, something like this. Now I repositioned my rook to support my passed pawns, and this would have been a better way for me to go. But instead of that, I played a2. He pushes his pawns. I go takes, and now he's pushing his h pawn. Now I hastily move my rook over here. King g3, a4, king takes, a3. So I'm now, really close to promoting, but so is he. So it's a race. A2, rook a1, b2, h7. And here I played rook d8. Very natural move, just stopping the promotion. But actually I had a winning move here. Just b takes a1, queen. And why I did not do this is because after he queens with check, if I move back, he just wins my queen, right? So that's bad. But I can actually, after he queens, I can cover that with rook. and also it's a check. And now I have, we both have a queen, but I have a rook for a knight. So this would have been interesting. And I also have like a queen just ready to go there. So my pawn is like, will be queening very, very soon. So yeah, that was my chance at winning this game. But instead I played rook d8, and now he sees that he cannot stop my pawns, or actually he can, but in order to stop my pawns, he has to give up both of his pieces. So he goes knight d1 check, I move my king, he takes the pawn with the knight, I take the knight, he takes the other pawn, I take the rook. Now I have a rook against two pawns, and this endgame is a draw. Because here, 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 king goes here, rook goes here, king goes here, rook goes here, pawn goes here, and here, yeah, I go rook h8, which is fine, it goes king g7, and here I made a crucial mistake. So I played rook back to d8, which now obviously blunders this, 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 and I can't stop this pawn. And what I could have played, but my rook is hanging. What do you do, right? What do you do instead? You play king e7. And now, if he takes the rook, you go this. This is stalemate. White has no moves. It's amazing. You can as well do this, but I think this one is like more in your face. And yeah, and another way to avoid all of this complication would have been to go simply king e7 here, and now he just has nothing. He cannot queen any of his pawns without losing both of them, and this is just a draw. But you know what? This did not happen. So at this stage, I think my opponent had like 5 or 4 seconds on the clock, and he was not thinking at all for like last 10 moves, just blitzing out moves, and he blitzed out this. And now I take, he takes, I take, and I had like 5 seconds on the clock as well. And that's how the game ended. It was a draw with just kings left on the board. And yeah, a very, very intense game, very intense endgame, which both of us misplayed, but it was really hard to see all the possibilities. With more time on the clock, maybe I would have found this idea. Maybe he would have found some other idea earlier on. Yeah, but you know, it was still a great game, very, very entertaining, and I hope you liked this as well. Yeah, if you did like it, leave this video a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.